So I have a question. Should we remove scratches from the clear coat? This subject comes up on occasion. Sometimes my customers they ask me about scratches. Now, typically they're seeing the deeper ones, the ones that have like that white kind of noticeable white color at the bottom of it, which means it's through the paint into the primer. Sometimes the metal, but usually it's into the primer. So should we remove those? What about all the really light ones, the ones that come and rubbing your hand over it because you think you see something, or brushing up against it accidentally, going through the automatic car wash, or improper washing, maybe not rinsing it thoroughly? I think if we kind of look at what kind of vehicle are we dealing with? Are we dealing with a 2014 Ford Focus or a 2021 Porsche GT3? One vehicle value is very low, one vehicle's value is very high, used for different purposes. One's for pleasure, one's for daily drive. So is it a daily driver, or is it something like a luxury car, or a performance luxury car, or just a performance car in general? That's kind of looking at your vehicle's value. The reason we look at the value is because heavy scratch removal, or paint correction, as some people call it, I call it heavy scratch removal. It's not inexpensive. It's can be quite expensive. Do you want to spend $1,000 just to remove scratches? And that's not counting the cost of the ceramic coating or whatever other work you might get done. So, I mean, that's a lot of money. So do you want to spend that kind of money? Well, sure, it might be worth it on a Porsche, but not a Ford Focus. And I would agree. I mean, if I had a Ford Focus that's scratched up, I wouldn't, probably I wouldn't be willing to spend as much money on it as if I had a Porsche. So, you know, the first factor, what kind of vehicle is it? Is it a daily driver? Is it going to get scratched up because I park close to people? I'm in a crowded parking lot. People are always stirring the door. Is it a daily driver that's just going to get used for commuting and I'm going to drive it 100 miles a day? You know, that vehicle's not worth the money. The second factor is the cost. Usually the first factor determines if the vehicle's worth it, what the worth is, what you're using it for. And then number two, if the first one didn't get you to say no, the second one will, which is the cost. And you know, and I'll just say this, if the average consumer, like who's watching this video, has a lot of scratches and you can see them, then if you see them, they're too deep, which means we have to take off a lot of clear coat. So let me just give you an idea. So spending $1,000, getting about a year before the scratches come back, it's like throwing your money away. And I mean, if you have a BMW or a Mercedes, you might be willing to spend that kind of money. But nevertheless, if you're driving at 100 miles a day, it's a commuter car, and you go through the automatic because you just have to, and it's just, you're throwing money away. It'd be far more valuable to get a ceramic coating that's going to withstand that abuse, even though it still might generate scratches because you're going through a tunnel wash. It would be far more valuable. So in other words, a $2,000 ceramic coating is worth way more than $1,500 or $1,000 paint correction, because of what you're getting long term: ease of clean, preservation, shine, gloss. Car looks amazing, easy to clean, stays clean for longer. You might only get a year out of paint correction because the scratches come back. So let's also talk about the wisdom behind removing scratches. So if you have the average clear coat 50 microns, which is, that's 50 microns roughly, a post-it note. So not very thick. That's how much clear coat you have. That's a protective layer that protects, it's the top coat, protects all the layers below. So if a Post-it note is 50 microns deep and you have a scratch that's 10 microns deep, okay, one scratch, not a big deal. Yes, we can kind of address that. We can lightly just maybe round off the edges, like I talked about earlier, round over the edges. What if you have scratches from top to bottom, end to end, like I see with vehicles that get driven through the automatic on a regular basis? The bigger the vehicle, the more it gets scratched up. That's just the reality. When you go through the automatic, the big vehicles get scratched more and they have more surface area. And it's not uncommon for the cost for a full-size truck to be about $2,000 for paint correction or heavy scratch removal. So if you don't stop going through the automatic, you're going to get more scratches. So why did I talk about wisdom with removing scratches? So when clear coat is sprayed on a car, the solvents carry all the hardeners to the top. So all the hardeners are at the top. So that top layer is the hardest. The bottom of the clear coat is going to be the softest. So the more of the top layer that you remove, this is a note from my daughter. If you remove that top layer, like if we were able to shave off 10 microns of this, we're actually going to make it softer, more easily damaged, more easily succumb to the environment, softer, weaker, inferior. So let's say we have a vehicle that goes to the automatic once a week, which is, I see it quite often, top to bottom, end to end, and there isn't a spot on the vehicle that doesn't have 10 micron or more deep scratches. So that means we're going to have to remove the 10 hardest microns, basically the protective layer of the protective layer. And you're going to spend $2,000 to do so. So, just think about this. You take a work truck that's a year old, that goes through the automatic on a weekly basis, and you pay me $2,000 to make the paint softer and weaker. Now, is it going to look absolutely fantastic? Sure. I mean, it's going to shine like a diamond up to a certain point. I mean, let's say I take off 1 or 2 microns of clear coat in my polishing process, or 10. I guarantee you the only difference that's going to be is the one that has the 2 microns removed is going to be still have some noticeable scratches compared to the one that has the 10. So you're going to have the same gloss. You're just going to see less scratches, which, going back to, scratches are like wrinkles. We all get them. You can prevent them. You can change your lifestyle, can change your habits. Smoking, drinking, getting lots of sleep, eating, good, those sorts of things. But your behavior as the owner of the vehicle is going to determine if there's scratches. So if you don't change those habits, it's going to continue and you just threw your money away. So sure, the instant gratification of that, wow, I paid $2,000, I really got my money's worth. You don't see scratches today when you pick it up. You might not see scratches tomorrow in a week. But in the course of a few months, over the course of a year or 2 years, it's quite possible you're going to have more scratches than when you first brought the vehicle in. Now what do? I put a 5 or 7 year ceramic or 10-year ceramic coating on your car, and we're 2 years in and you have just as many scratches as the day you had it corrected and coated. Now what? Do we take off that 10-year coating and paint correct it again and put it back on? Now we've weakened the clear coat even. We've taken off another 3 or 4 microns, which some would say, well, 2 or 3 or 4 microns is not a lot. And I say it's the best 2 or 3. That's the best 4 microns you got. So I don't see how that is an improvement other than visually. So the more scratches we remove, the less they will be noticed, but the weaker we make the clear coat. And from my perspective, the value for service of scratch removal, or we can call it clear coat removal, that value I think is very low compared to what the service is and what you're paying. And you take a value for service, or value for cost, however you want to look at it, for ceramic coating, the value is way higher than what you're paying because of what you're getting. And I'll just say this, my ceramic coatings actually will last at least double their time statement. So in other words, if I have a 5-year coating, it can quite easily last 10 years based on just wash it, don't use soap. Soap fine, yes, but it leaves a residue behind and attracts dirt, which helps it to get dirtier faster. That's just the way it is. So just going back to the Ford Focus, I don't know why I'm picking on the Ford Focus, poor little Ford Focus, compared to like a BMW or a Mercedes. One vehicle is worth more than another, or at least its perceived value is higher. Although Mercedes and BMW's value, it drops fast. It's the market reflects the problems that they have, maintenance and repairs and stuff like that, and prices really they do not hold their value very well. But nevertheless, you're going to treat a BMW differently than you will a Ford Focus. That's just the reality. So, guy comes in, he's got a Mercedes, he drives a tunnel wash, drives 100 miles a day from York to DC every day, whatever the mileage is. And he says, man, I got a lot of scratches. Yes, you do. We can remove them. It's probably going to be $1,000, give or take. And that's not going to solve the problem. That will not solve your scratch problem. It's only going to delay it for a little bit until they return because of all the stuff you've been doing to cause them. Neglect, by not washing it, and the dirt moving around, or the tunnel washes, or just picking up I've seen people take a terry towel, and like the cheapest terry towel, and just you're just pushing dirt around. It's painful to watch that. So, scratches are just, whether it's a Focus or a Mercedes, both cars are going to get, that's just the reality. So I just think paying to remove scratches, it's a gamble because you're hoping they don't come back, or at least the detailer has not educated you on that fact. Are they going to come back? He says, man, you need paint correction. I'm going to put this 7-year coating. You must have this paint correction. If you don't, I'm going to lock the scratches in, and they're going to be there. You're still going to see them. Oh my goodness, what's that going to cost? Well, my 7 years, $1,800. It's going to be another $2,800. Yeah, let's do it. And man, it's all hyped up, and everybody's excited. And then in a year, there they are again. They're back. I think that's not very good education. Now, you bring in a Porsche that's 20 years old and it's got single stage paint and it's dull and scratched up. Yeah, $2,000 to polish that sucker out, another $1,800 for a coating, and then it's going to sit in a garage and not be driven. Sure, let's paint correct that one. Let's remove all those issues. A brand new BMW that you're been driving every day, and now it's going to be it's a daily driver. It's a $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 whatever. And you're like, oh man, I've been neglecting it. Like, can we get this fixed? You know what? It's not going to be my daily driver anymore. I'm willing to spend the money. Sure, let's go for it. Keeping in mind that we're removing clear coat. We're removing the strength of the protective layer, the thickest layer. Now, the coating that we put on is going to resist nature better than the factory clear coat. That's where a coating is always compared to that clear coat. It has better dirt release properties, it has better gloss, better chemical resistance. It's not impervious. It's going to take rocks and chip the paint, and from rock chips and stuff like that. It can still wear, but it is much better. It's much more. It's able to resist nature better than the factory clear coat. And it's able to do that for a really, really long time. So yeah, if you got that car that you want to retire and put in the garage, have it be a collector's item someday, whether it's a year old, 5 years old, 10 years old, 20 years old, whatever. And yeah, that's kind of it. Heavy scratch removal is like a niche. It's a niche service. And I know there's some that like, hey, I swear every car I do is, and I'll just give you an idea. I've not done paint correction or heavy scratch removal in like 5 years. that used to be part of the daily when a car came in and we detailed the exterior. That was just part of it. I didn't hardly charge. I didn't know what it was. That's just what you did. You had to polish because, you know, you take, you know, if we rewind the clock and the slow accumulation or the slow transition from thicker clear coat that weren't very shiny from single stage paint now to the more modern paints that are a lot thinner, but their gloss is much more credible, and you just have to get the dirt off and the oxidation off, and bang, it comes back. The older cars did not really oxidize like they do now, thicker, harder, different solvent base, I guess. I don't really know. And, you know, in order to make those shine, well, I clean your car, I wax it. It looks dull and dingy, and you paid me $180 to do the inside and out. And this is, you know, this is 20 years ago. $180 to do a detail inside and out. And I can't give you that car, and this is just my kind of limited, I didn't understand. I couldn't give you that car back wash and wax and get it looks dull and dingy because the clear coat is kind of thick, and there's not a whole lot of like pop to the clear. There's just not a lot of gloss. So you had to create the gloss. So how do we do that? Well, and there's also scratches because it's thick and they're deep, and we want to get the scratches out. So man, we'd bust out the rotary and we'd polish that thing, and the initial polish was removing kind of the defects. It actually was now duller than before. Now we had to go to another step, and we had to remove all those defects we put in by removing the defects. Swirl, we had like a swirl remover step. It was like step number 2. This is where all the 1 step, 2 step, 3 step paint correction. That's where all that stuff came from. So the next step was removing the swirls and all the holograms. So another step. Well, now, okay, we've kind of got the paint improved, better than it was when it started, certainly better than when we did that first compound step. Now we had to make it shine. So then we went to like a gloss step or glaze, they called it, or some sort of, sometimes you didn't have to do this step on a car depending on the color and whatever. And then you do like a soft pad and make this like, you're putting the makeup on it. You're putting the gloss, this is where the gloss is going to come out. And really make kind of the shine really deep and kind of dark and wet. So that's the third step. Then, well, none of that stuff had any kind of protectant in it. So now we have to put a wax or that's all we had, a wax or a sealant. There was no other option. So now we put the protective layer on, which was the wax or this, whatever. And it was paste, and that was the fourth step, which wasn't polishing. It was all done by hand, because at that point, you didn't need to use a machine. I guess you could, but I always did it by hand. And then you went around and knocked all that, you know, got all the paste crust off or whatever, hoping you didn't touch any of the plastic trim. So that's kind of like a 4-step paint correction. So now when the thing was done, it looked glossy, but only for about a month, just because the stuff was full of, the wax was full of salt. We didn't know. That was the only thing of it, and that was pro-grade stuff. There really wasn't a whole lot of pro-grade stuff. That was just what was available at the time, the best. It was basically what the consumer grade stuff is now. So the reason that I did it that way is because if I didn't, you would say, well, what did I pay for? My car looks dingy. It looks, I mean, sure, there's no dirt on it, but I need that pop. I didn't know to sell the customer that, give them an option. We can wash and wax it. It's gonna, you know, this is gonna be the results, or we can go to the next step. So I should have been charging $600 or $800 back then to do it. But that's just what you did, because my style was kind of restoration hobbyist style. And it's changed since then, but the restoration hobbyist style was, you get the car in, you open the hood, you clean the engine, you shine it up, you detail the interior, you slick it up with some slicky goo, clean the trunk, the jams, the wheels, you scrub the barrels. I mean, you scrub this thing down like crazy, decon wash, and then you did a 4-step, basically, I guess a 3-step paint correction. That's just how you detail a car. That was the only option I offered. And actually, that wasn't 20 years ago. I was still doing that. What I was talking about, the transition earlier, was cars needed to be detailed that way 20 years ago. I was still doing it 15 years ago, even though it didn't need it quite to the same extent. I was still doing it 10 years ago, even though we're getting to now cars are needing that sort of thing less and less. And now 5 years ago, I was still doing that to an extent. I was starting to come down a little bit, kind of not drop the standard, but drop the process because they just weren't needed. But it was hard to remove that part of me from the detailing because that was me. Detailing and me, that's just what we did. We're one and the same. There's a lot of ego and pride, a lot of prideful, narcissistic, ego-driven people are driven to detailing, and it's a shame. And to an extent, yes, I struggle with that, and I'll probably continue to struggle with that until I no longer am able to struggle with it. And that's just part. I have to do this. I must do it this way. But 5 years ago, cars did not need it. Could we do it? Yes. Giving them an option. Here's the cost. Let's do it. But it did not need to be 3 steps, because cars today, you wash it. And I'm telling you this, I can do a kind of a deep clean chemical wash on a car and achieve better results in 45 minutes than it could in 4 or 5 hours of a 3-step paint correction. Hands down, and not even close. So cars don't need all that stuff now. They just need a light polish, a decon wash, chemical wash, a light polish, just to knock off that oxidation, and then whatever protectant you want to put on it, whether it's just wax sealant or a ceramic coating. And I mean, the results are they're just from 10, 15, 20 years ago. There's just no comparison to today with the results you could produce with just because of the amount of clear coat. The hardness of the clear coat 20 years ago was just a lot more. There wasn't any shine. You had to put the shine on it. Now, in order to make a car shine, you just take stuff off of it. You take the dirt off. And a chemical wash is the first stage in that. I mean, you can call that a step. That is, I mean, technically, if I decon it and polish it, that's 2 steps. It just isn't 2 steps with a machine. But if you don't do the decon, you don't do it properly, no matter whatever you do, it's not going to be quite as the results are going to not be what they should be. So kind of went off on a rabbit trail there, but it all kind of connects, because I'm trying to help you understand the culture. If you're interested, if you're watching this video, you must be to some extent. I know I am. I could talk about this stuff all day. But the culture of detailing, you go to one shop, and most of the guys around me, they disagree with me. A multi-step paint correction is kind of, they're going to assume you want it. They're going to educate you and talk you into it, and they want to make that extra money. But if you make that clear coat weaker than it was before, make it softer, the coating is going to perform according to what it's adhered to, what it's stuck to, which is an inferior surface. Does the customer know it's inferior? No, but it is, whether you know it or not. The clear coat has been made softer. Now, what if you got a 3-year coating and you come back and you want to have it done again, or the next person does, and we're going to make the clear coat even if you're only taking a couple microns off? It is a gamble, because you don't know what you're getting. How long is this coating going to last? Why is this coating failed? Video after video on YouTube. Well, why is this coating fail? Well, the prep probably wasn't done. If a coating's failing, it's most likely because of the prep. And number 2, I think it's because the clear coat has been aggressively polished 1, 2, or 3 or more times, and it's just soft. And it is not able to hold the coating on, and it allows the coating to just what you would call delaminate, or come off of the surface, kind of like tire tread, just kind of wears it down to where there's nothing left, or very, very little. So the best way to remove scratches is to not allow them to accumulate. And the best way to do that is to break the habits. May not be your habits, might have been the guy before you, but break the habits that have allowed the scratches to accumulate to begin with. Wash it properly. I can bring you in if you're local. I can walk you through how to do a wash. It's super simple. Avoid the automatic car wash. So if you wash it yourself or bring it to me to wash, we charge $52.50 to wash a sedan, and then a little bit more for anything that's a little bit bigger. SUV, I think it's $55. I think a truck is 60 something, 65, $62.50, I can't remember. So those are the best ways to remove scratches. So should we remove scratches? How about we prevent them from accumulating? And if you have them, weigh your options, cost, what kind of car is it? Are they going to accumulate even more? And I think you'll be able to figure the answer out on your own.